Hi guys, how you guys doing? Um, I'm stepping out on a limb here, kind of, but I think I want to do this. I want to talk about my latest thoughts on quantum mechanics. It's a hard question, so when you take on such a question, you immediately invite failure. So, but yet something tells me to do it. So let's just try, okay? There's something called quantum entanglement where particles interact and they experience non-local, which means not at the same place, connection. If I know one thing about one particle, I already know something about the other one, and it's not even nearby. It could be way away. And there's that. And then there's something called quantum collapse. If you have, for small enough things, size is important here. They can be many different things at once for a while. For maybe even if they're small enough, maybe even for a few seconds, maybe even a significant measurable common amount of time. But then when that superposition or multi states at once becomes too conglomerated or too much randomness and too much indecisive, nature just collapses it through gravity. And then a decision is made and superposition reduces to position. But for bigger things like stars, they're too big. They're so big that there's enough matter that they can't be in superposition very long, maybe even not even measurable time, but yet maybe just a little bit of time, but then they immediately collapse because they're big. And the question of physics has been for a long time to unite the very small quantum theories with the very big general relativity and relativity theories. And we may be getting closer to that. The same principles apply. It's just that the size of things matters, because if there's more size, there's more geometry there that gives it stability, that keeps it from being in superposition for any length of time. But something's very small, there's such little geometry to keep it in check that it can be many things at once for longer times. And in between, like us humans, we're like in between the two. We have enough size that we still exist day to day, but we have enough smallness that we can be like Torderson's cat can be alive and dead until you look at it. Or something could happen that I thought about and my thought affected it. Or, there's quantum things with us, but there's also, classical things with us, because we are big compared to atoms, but we're small compared to stars. So we're learning to combine the two, where we can actually have a unified theory where we can explain the gravity of very small things, something we can call quantum gravity. Not a different theory or different truth, but different size of things. So different seeming truth, but only difference because of the size and the matter. Geometry is the shape and size of matter. Or even if it's theoretical, it's still something that's supposed to have a certain size and shape or whatever. And I'm just ranting, but I'm just trying to, add my little 2 cents to this thought of things that are going around. Albert Einstein was actually very right on about stuff. And he was really like Tesla, Nikola Tesla. Both Einstein and Tesla were way ahead of their time. Edison was right on time, so he's the famous dude that got all the money. Tesla was ahead of his time, so he was the weird dude that didn't have anything. But now we know which is which, because in history showed the truth that Tesla was right. Well, Bohr, Niels, whatever his first name was, starts with N, Niels Bohr or something, was the Edison of Einstein's day in physics. He was on time, so he became the great. Einstein was ahead of his time, so he was the weirdo in Princeton, and people thought he was nuts, but he was actually ahead of his time, like Tesla was. And now history is showing Einstein was right, and more right, ahead of his time, and Bohr was just the hip dude of the day, with got all the fame and money or whatever. And so I'm just doing my little 2 cents. I'm using whatever gifts I have for my channel. I'm gonna go into some. My dad always said 2 things about me, and he didn't have to say anything good about anybody. He didn't do that. He didn't just butter people up. It wasn't his style. He said he'd never seen anyone do math like my son Jim, referring to me. And he said, Jim has very good hand-eye coordination. I just feel like I can approach some of these things. I'm not the genius physicist, but I have a mind that can think, and I'm just trying to do my little 2 cents on my channel. I'm not going to win a Nobel Prize for any of this, but it's something that I think about, physics and theory and all that, and I just try to share that on my channel. I'm not trying to be the hotshot physicist. I'm just doing my little part. So anything else to say about this? If you think of it geometrically, where the size and the geometry causes the collapse, you can eliminate a lot of the what do you call it? Paradox of the observation theory of collapse, where something collapses when you observe it. Well, there's a lot of problems with that, because what is an observer? When does it become observed? How does it know? Does it matter if it's just a mechanical machine observing it, or an amoeba or a bug observing it, or a human observing it? There's so many variables there, and it's such mystic pseudoscience. That was what Einstein was against, and yet it won the day. People were just thinking we wasted a lot of time in physics thinking, well, just observe something and I can make change. If it's physics, if it's the geometry and the size and the quantum gravity, it eliminates a lot of that guesswork and a lot of that just really nonsense, a lot of it, and it gets us back on point with the problem. And we wasted a lot of time, like we did with Tesla and Tesla. We wasted a lot of time not listening to Tesla. We wasted a lot of time not listening to Einstein, because we go with the hotshot dude that's popular in the day. But while the dude that's really on track is ahead of his time and gets shut off in a corner somewhere until 100 years later. But now we're 100 years later, so let's do something about it, is all I'm saying, yeah. And maybe consciousness is part of the nature of matter. It just has to be arranged a certain way where it can be a human. But it doesn't mean that only humans are conscious. Bugs are conscious. A rock is somewhat limitedly conscious in its own way. A star is somewhat conscious in its own way. A cat is conscious in its own way, and humans are very conscious in a beautiful way. But not because humans are alive, everything else is dead, but because we're just very well arranged structures of the aliveness that is in all matter. Think of it like a little molecule of something isn't anything, but when you arrange it enough of it in a certain way, you get water, which is very unique. It's wet. Mercury can be a metal, but it can be it can be liquid and it's not even wet. It's actually a dry metal, but it's a dry liquid. Can you believe that? Weird stuff there. But what makes water wet? Well, it's the way it's structured in big ways, and those little atoms that aren't wet at all share their wetness, whatever little wetness they have, with a big thing that becomes wet on a bigger scale. We just happen to be very intricate structures of consciousness that's in everything. But when you arrange it with enough things like a brain, human brain, you get a greater level of consciousness, i.e. human consciousness. Not because humans are alive, everything else is dead, but because humans are very intricate, well-formed and well-structured versions of the aliveness, consciousness that's in everything anyway. We're just the way of structuring it where you can actually see it amplified as human consciousness. It really makes you happy to be alive, happy to be conscious, and it does my rhetoric a good service too, because if in physics and with what I'm talking about, you don't need to have a God to explain. See, having a God is hard to prove wrong, because you don't know that you can't prove it. There's no test to show, is there a God? There's no test, or we would have known yes or no. But regardless of whether there's a God or not, it's the idea that God made us is a circular argument and therefore useless. Because then what made God? I don't know. Nothing. Okay, well, I buy that. Let's go with that. That doesn't answer the question. If I'm made by something that you don't know how it was made, you have not solved a problem. You have put it off. You've passed the buck to something else and then replaced intellect with faith, which is stupid, worse than the problem you had in the first place. But you want an answer, so you choose to have faith instead of intelligence, and you use a circular argument to get you nowhere, in fact, in a bad place, because you believe in something that probably isn't true and doesn't help you, which is there's a God. So fucking what? What made him? I don't know. Then you haven't solved the question. You haven't done anything. You've just comforted yourself with something called faith, which means you get to be stupid and happy at the same time. I love you guys. Peace, love, and rock and roll.